A good example of where I've seen TESS used really goes back to my days when I looked after freight traders before we combined the two companies. And we had a client that we worked with there that we did consistently year after year European full vehicle movement tenders. Now they were very successful for the client. They saved a lot of money. But one of the things that actually happened because of the way the marketplace was that more and more of their business was going from people who owned equipment to freight forwarders. Now, I've got nothing against freight forwarders. They provide a very, very good service to the freight industry. But at times of short supply, after about the third or fourth year of doing this, where the company had saved large amounts of money, they were finding the fifth year, the supply-demand curve had changed. There was more demand for the movement of goods than there were trucks available to move them. And the freight forwarders that they were working with suffered the same problem. So what was happening was that the freight forwarders were struggling to get the trucks which they were promising to the manufacturer. And their quality levels started to drop off, their service levels started to drop off. And they came to us in the fifth year, I think it was, as I said, and said, how can you help us change this? How can you help us improve our quality of service? Their view was very simple. They wanted to do more and more business with people who actually own the trucks. They wanted a less of a risk and they wanted to have some more surety, and they felt the surety was by working primarily with people who own trucks rather than went to the open market to get them. And that made sense. That project started as a European full vehicle movement tender with an RFI at the start of it to actually ascertain on what routes they could actually get people who own the trucks that they would use to carry their goods. As that project was starting, one of the other things that a strategic decision was taken inside their business was they wanted to change payment terms. They actually wanted to change their payment terms from 30 days to 90 days. And the tender was already out there. But they wanted to know the impact of doing that as well. Now, I always talk about the flexibility of the TESS platform. We were able to actually build that into a running tender to communicate to the carriers why they wanted the information and how they wanted the information delivered, and the carriers were able to amend their bids based upon a few parameters. We were quite clever, in fact. We actually didn't turn around and say 90-day payment terms. What we said is, what would be your costs for paying in 45 days or 60 days or 90? So it presented the manufacturer with options. The thing that was incredibly powerful, though, was when they started to run the scenarios at the end of the tender. Not only were they actually getting scenarios which told them what the lowest cost was and where the carriers were operating and who would be doing which routes in their tender, at the same time they were able to look and see what's the impact in terms of cash of appointing that particular scenario, because they knew the payment terms that were being offered and the costs of those payment terms. They were also able to say at the same time, with each of those scenarios, how much of my business is really going to be done by people who own the trucks. Because they knew that they wouldn't be able to get to the situation that 100% of their business would be done by people who own the trucks. They also wanted to protect current carriers. So you had all of these things going on at the same time. The buyers, a team of 6 buyers across the whole of Europe, would never have been able to deal with that amount of change or that amount of queries without having a tool like TESS. But what they could really very simply do with every single scenario they ran is they could see the impact on 3 things, sometimes more. They could see how many carriers they'd be using. They would see how much it would cost them in terms of either savings or an on-cost, and in fact it was savings. And they could make value judgments for their business as a group of individuals about the strategy of having longer payment terms and operating with carriers who owned the majority of their own trucks. The beauty of it is they saved money, they extended their payment terms, they achieved those two objectives. And they also improved the quality of service because they actually gave more business to people who own trucks. They were proven to be right. They found themselves in this situation where they'd actually redressed that balance. They'd extended their payment terms, they saved money, and their service had improved. And they would not have been able to do that without the TESS platform.